Welcome back to the Jazz Blast podcast. Today, December 14th, we talk about the scare against the Warriors, our defense last year versus offense this year, which is more dominant, and any moves for the Jazz this trade deadline. It's all coming up on the Jazz Blast podcast. So last night, scary game against the Warriors, almost dropped one to a 5-21 team. The Jazz were able to squeeze out a win, though. Luckily for us, Bojan Bogdanovic hit quite a few threes, ended up with 32 points. Donovan Mitchell had 28 points. But not a lot of bench scoring last night, and that was the issue. Emmanuel Mudiay with 4, Georges Niang had 3 points, Jeff Green had 5, Ed Davis 0 points after 12 minutes of play. So it was tough. Jazz were playing from behind to the Warriors, who frankly aren't a great team this year. But what was happening is their guys were scrappy. They were playing life like their lives depended on it, which for a lot of them it kind of does. They're playing for contracts, trying to stay in the league, and so you could see, especially when rebounds were in question, they were boxing out or getting around whoever was boxing them out. So kudos to them. For the Warriors, I want to say, Marquise Chris ended up with 13 rebounds. Glenn Robinson ended up with 8. And so they had a lot of second and third chance opportunities because they were crashing the glass and really playing hard. So they stuck around, but luckily the Jazz were able to escape. That would have been a really, really tough loss. Jazz Twitter is already blowing up. People are jumping off the ship quick, but good to get a win. Right the ship a little bit. Hopefully keep some people in. But let's take a little deep dive to see what's going on. Why are so many people bailing on the Jazz? And one of the biggest issues is that coming into this season, we were expecting our offense to be one of the best offenses in the league. And frankly, at times it has been that, but not consistently at all. And so I took a look at the numbers thanks to Cleaning the Glass. And I want to compare last year's defense because that seemed to be the focus. We were a very dominant defense last year, and so this year the shift with all the moves that we made was to be a dominant offense. And so when we were able to hold teams last year, when our defense was above average, meaning they held teams to less than 105 points per 100 possessions, we were able to do that 52% of the time. 43 out of our 82 regular season games. We were able to win 36 of those 43 games. Or in other words, 84% of the time, we got a win when we were able to hold teams to below average, below the 50th percentile in points per possession. And so compare that was last year's defense. This year's offense, when we were able to be above average, play a game where our offense is above the 50th percentile, we're even more dominant. We've won 6 out of 7 games, or 86%. The problem is we've only played a game where our offense was above the 50th percentile, meaning like average for the league, 7 out of our 24 games. Now, these numbers were taken before last night's game, actually before the Minnesota game, I think, if I remember correctly. I'll have to redo these numbers now. But, our offense, when it clicks and when we're rolling, is dominant. The issue is we're just not getting there enough. And that's probably due to our second unit. Like we saw last night. When our bench guys were in, we allowed the other team to get a big lead. And then our starters are, rather than kind of keeping it even, then having our starters take off and get a big lead, we're just playing from behind almost every night. And so I'm sure that adds to the frustration that a lot of the players seem to be dealing with. Some of that frustration probably comes with the offense not clicking as much or as often as we had hoped, or as they'd hoped too. But also playing from behind, I'm sure is tough, especially when it happens pretty much every night. And so luckily we've been able to claw our way out of it a few times, like last night, avoid losing to a frankly terrible Warriors team. But the issue is we were able to do it because they're kind of terrible. And so a lot of these games lately have been teams that aren't terrible and that don't take their foot off the gas, that don't have lineups that aren't great, that aren't full of like full-on NBA players. And so if we keep playing the way we're playing, we're not going to win a lot of games, as we've seen. Like on those games where we've been below average offensively this year, we've won, at that point when I took these stats, 17 out of 24 games. So 71% of the time we're playing below average on offense, and we only win 41% of those games, 7 out of 17. So it's tough. But that brings up the next point. Like, the trade deadline is approaching, and I've seen a lot of questions on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, and I just don't know if the Jazz will make many, if any, moves. I don't know if they can, because the roster's built up of guys that are playing for close to minimum contracts. I mean, we're paying our starters a ton of money, and that's why our bench is kind of filled with kind of minimum guys. And we don't have a lot of pieces. People keep bringing up Dante Exum as a possible move, but with the way he's come back from injury and the way he's playing so far, I don't know what he really gets you. And so it's tough. But one thing I kind of want to see is the Salt Lake City Stars. Last time I checked, they had gone on like a 9-win streak. One of the best, what do they call it? G League? G League teams in their league. And so it'd be worth, we're already struggling. The lineup that we have per cleaning the glass, the lineup where it's mostly bench guys of Moutier, Mitchell, Green, Niang, and Davis is minus 37.8 this season. So, it can't really hurt to throw some of these G League guys in, especially when they're playing hard. They're winning games in the G League, so it can't hurt to try and see. I know a couple of them are scoring close to 20 points a game, and so throw them in there. It can't hurt at this point. The only thing that's, I'm sure, tough for Quinn is a lot of these guys like Jeff Green, Ed Davis, Moutier, and Ingles, once he moves back to playing off the bench when Conley gets back in. A lot of those guys are used to playing big minutes, meaningful minutes in games. And so who do you bench? Not just bench. They're already coming off the bench. Who do you potentially not play to allow some of these guys to come up from the G League and see if they can make a difference? But it's getting to the point where we're almost losing to the Golden State Warriors, who are 5-22 now, and it can't hurt. Something needs to change, and I don't know if anything's going to happen at the trade deadline. So a lineup change or something has to happen, and so we'll see what Quinn does. It's going to be tough. Luckily, our schedule lightens up. Orlando's next. We should be able to get a win there, but that's what I was thinking before last night's game. We did get the win, but it wasn't as satisfying as blowing out the Warriors finally. But we'll see what they do. The next couple of weeks coming up are going to be interesting to see what changes, if anything. Because at this rate, we're not. We're 6th in the West. Teams are looking good, and unless something changes drastically, we're going to get set up again without home court. First round of the playoffs, tough matchup against good teams. Where coming into the season, we're thinking, hey, we're contenders. So something needs to change. As everybody's been jumping off the Jazz bandwagon as quickly as they can. Something needs to change so that we can keep those hopes alive, because that's, at the end of the day, that's what we're all here for. And so it's tough. Don't bail yet, though. But I'm sure they'll right the ship. Offense is too good when it's clicking to not be in the mix. So post your comments below, questions, what you think the Jazz should change. Hit the subscribe button to support the channel if you would. Give us a thumbs up if you liked it. And let me know what you think the Jazz should do, how they can right the ship, how we can get back to conversation about contending for Western Conference Championship, if not the NBA Finals. So let me know what you think needs to change, and go Jazz.